Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to follow up on that a little bit, if I might. You know, the IRS during the last year, as it's been under all this scrutiny, has been accused of incompetence, mismanagement, stonewalling, a whole range of things. But I think one of the things that gets at what Senator Portman was talking about in terms of restoring the trust, and frankly, we think that we congratulate you on your willingness to take this on, because there is a huge, huge need, I think, to try and get the American people to trust the revenue collector again in our country. But I think the politicization of the IRS is a stigma that has attached to it. And that is something you do not want to have with the agency that has so much power with the American people when it comes to collecting revenue. And so the point that he's raising with regard to how the IRS is now sort of in this role of stepping on the scales to determine what is or isn't political speech, to me seems to be completely outside the realm of what the IRS ought to be about. And so I would just ask you a question as a general matter. Do you believe our country is better off with more political speech or less political speech? And if confirmed, what principles will you follow in applying your views? And I think it bears on this particular issue and these regulations that have been proposed.
It's an important question. I think what the public needs to be confident about, about any commissioner, and certainly I would try if confirmed to be commissioner, is that the commissioners, whatever his political views are, is not going to apply them to the IRS. So that my sense would be, having served both Republican and Democratic administrations, having spent most of my time in management, not politics, I would want the public to be confident that the decisions we're making are primarily focused on what's the best for tax administration. So that while I may have views on political views of one kind or another, I want people to be comfortable that those views aren't going to influence my decisions in terms of what's best for the IRS, what's best for the country. So I think, as a general matter, I think the country's political system works well. I think political speech is important, but I don't think it's my role to have a view as to what ought to happen in the political realm. I think my role is going to be, how do we most efficiently and effectively administer the tax code in a way that people have trust and have confidence that whatever our views are politically, whatever organizations we happen to belong to, that's not influencing the decisions we're making at the IRS.
Well, and I would share the view that if there's a way to separate the tax administration role from these political determinations, because I just think that that is it completely undermines the confidence and the trust the American people have in an institution that is so important and so powerful in our country and in our culture. I want to just ask a question, too, because this comes back to the seriousness, I guess, with which you take these issues that have occurred in the last year, because the President earlier, if you go back to May of this year, called the targeting of conservative groups for extra scrutiny by the IRS, quote, outrageous. And that a few months later, in July of this year, the President came out and referred to what he called, quote, the phony scandals in the context of discussing the IRS scandal. And, you know, I guess what I would ask, you know, just in terms of that characterization, where you fall. What's your view of what happened there and all that came out of that and all it did to erode the trust of the American people?
I think it's important for the investigations, of which there are numerous going on, but a significant one is the bipartisan investigation in this committee to be concluded so that we can actually reach as much of a consensus as we can of what the facts are as to what actually happened. I think, as the President responded and everyone responded, to the extent that the facts show that conservative groups or liberal groups or any groups were targeted because of their political positions when they made applications, that really is intolerable. I think people, when they apply for certifications as whether it's a 501c3, 4, 5, or 6, should be comfortable that no matter who they are, no matter what their political beliefs are, their religious beliefs or other beliefs are, they're going to be treated fairly and even-handedly, and they'll get the same treatment everybody else gets. And I think that that's a message that needs to go forward. I think to the extent that that did not happen, and I hope that this investigation, when it's completed, will give us the facts to tell us what actually did happen, To the extent it did not happen, as the President said, that's intolerable. And I think people deserve to know that we've looked into it, that the investigations have been public and have revealed whatever the facts are, and the appropriate responses have been taken. And as Commissioner going forward, the best I can do at the start is to commit that we're not going to let that happen. The culture will not be designed to further that, that we'll be transparent about any problems we run into, and that the public, and certainly this committee, will know about those problems as soon as we do.
Okay, well, and I guess then what I hear you saying, at least I hope what I hear you saying, is when you say intolerable, the President described in May this as outrageous, and then later, as I said, in the summer, described it as a phony scandal. You don't view this to be a phony scandal?
No, on the basis of what's been determined thus far, I think it's been an important matter to run to ground. I think to the extent that for whatever reason, whether inadvertent or simply an attempt to respond to the overwhelming applications could file, to the extent that organizations felt that they were treated poorly, and that they were, that's not fair, it's not acceptable, it's intolerable. I think that's not the way the IRS operates generally. I think to the extent that the public can restore its confidence and be comfortable that this was, to the extent it happened, to an unfortunate event that's not going to happen again, I think that's important. Because as I said yesterday, trust is the most important asset that the IRS has, and I will do the best I can, as I'm sure the employees are prepared to do, to restore the American public confidence and trust in the agency.
Okay. One final question, Mr. Chairman, and this has to comes back to what your view is on whether or not IRS employees that are going to be responsible for enforcing Obamacare ought to also have to be subject to that law. Because there's earlier this year we learned that the National Treasury Employees Union, which includes IRS employees, opposes the legislation that would require them to leave the FEHBP and enroll in the exchanges. What's your view on whether or not the IRS, which is the enforcement agency, also ought to have to be participating in those?
I had not been aware that the union had taken that position. I think IRS employees as federal employees ought to be treated as all federal employees. And if the federal employees are going to be in the program, the IRS ought to be in the program. I don't think the IRS employees should have some special status in regard to that issue.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Koskinen, thank you.